Guys, welcome back to the Girl Gone London channel. If you're new here, my name is Kaylin. I'm an American who's lived in the UK for almost 10 years, and today we are answering the question, is UK private healthcare better than the NHS? Okay, so if you're wondering why my hair looks absolutely crazy, we just got caught in a rainstorm. So for those of you who commented on my video about Britain and the heat, yes, the heat has broken. It is now cold and rainy again. So still glad I have an air conditioner for the next time it gets hot. But for those of you worried about us all melting in the heat here, we're doing fine again, back to normal summer weather. So no worries there. Now in this video, I'm going to be talking about private healthcare in the UK versus the NHS. And for my British audience out there who I know are going to be like, how dare you even suggest that private healthcare here is better than our beloved NHS? Trust me, I'm on your side, but I do think that there are some things to compare and contrast when it comes to private healthcare in the UK, particularly for people who really aren't familiar with it. Because that's where I wanted to start. A lot of people, particularly from abroad, really think that there is no other option than the NHS. I know when I first moved here, I kind of thought the NHS was the only option and didn't really understand that the NHS was the majority of your options, but that you could also go private, which is very similar to what we do in the US where it's all private. So that's the first thing. If you're from abroad, you're not used to the UK, you don't understand how the healthcare system works here. Basically, the NHS is going to be the first point of call for the vast majority of people for everything. Doctor's appointments, hospital surgeries, like anything you can think in the medical sphere. Often the NHS takes care of the vast majority of the country. However, you do have the option to go private, to pay for your own healthcare from different providers. And the latest statistics are that about 12% of UK residents have private healthcare cover. Whether they use it or not, I don't know the statistics on that, but over 10% of the country do actually have the insurance for it to be able to go private. So we'll talk about paying for private healthcare and stuff later in the video, but really there are more people than you think who do take advantage of private healthcare here. So let's talk about that. Now, I really only like to talk about things in my videos that I do have mostly direct experience with. So for instance, I'm not going to do a video about like giving birth in the UK versus the US anytime soon because I am not or have not given birth and I'm not going to anytime soon. So I don't want to speak to people's experiences that I haven't had at least a little bit of information on myself. So to give you a little bit of background why I'm now doing my private healthcare video, we have to go back to the YouTube comment section. Yes, that's right, the YouTube comment section. So I have been doing videos for about 6 months now. And in that time, I've gotten definitely 2 that I can think of, maybe 1 or 2 more, but I've gotten comments from people saying that I should have my neck looked at because it looks like I have a problem with my thyroid or I have some sort of like bulge or lump. So I kind of chalked this up for a while to people diagnosing me over the internet. I actually do appreciate their comments and pointing out something because you always see those stories of like random fan notices, celebrities something from a picture and then whatever. So sometimes that does really turn into something useful and helpful. In this case, it just made me curious because I hadn't noticed anything about my own neck. Anyway, long story short, after a couple people had commented on my YouTube videos, a couple weeks ago, I decided to get it checked out because I'm going to the US soon. And I was like, let me just figure it out, make sure like nothing serious is wrong. I don't think anything is wrong, but like, let me go check. So I went to the GP from the NHS. So went and they said, yeah, maybe you should get a scan done because we're not entirely sure. It does look a little swollen. And I'm like, okay, I don't really notice anything different, but now I feel like I should get it checked out. So because of the timeline, waiting for an NHS appointment was not necessarily going to put me on the right timeline to be able to figure this out and make sure everything was fine before I get on my flight to the US. So for all of you at home, I took the opportunity to engage in a little bit of private healthcare experience in the UK. So I got an ultrasound done privately on my neck. Again, just a very easy scan. And so I visited a private UK hospital, got to go on the inside, experience what it was like. And so I haven't been inpatient in a UK private hospital, but I have now experienced a little bit of private healthcare in the UK. By the way, my neck is absolutely fine. I think it just looks fat on camera. So take it in all of its glory. It's fine. Thank you for your comments. I'm fine. Okay, so let's talk about the reasons someone might go private in the UK. The first reason is exactly what happened to me. It has to do with NHS waiting times. So typically, if you are referred for something where they think it might be cancer or it might be something else serious, they can put you on a fast 2-week referral track. And again, this is fast for the UK. So a normal NHS waiting list, depending on where you live and depending on what you're waiting for, can really, really vary. Could be a month, could be 6 weeks, but again, it really depends on what your GP thinks of the situation and how serious they think it is. So if they think it's serious, the fast track is 2 weeks. In my situation, I didn't have 2 weeks. We're going away before I go away to America, and I just wanted to get it done, and I wanted to be able to schedule it in like the next day or the day after. So this is the first reason why somebody might choose to go private instead of the NHS. For whatever reason, they would feel happier, or they have to have the scan or test or see the specialist doctor before they feel the NHS could get to them on the wait list. Now, I've really heard people mention this in regards to physiotherapy, and a lot of people, and again, this is based on my research, I haven't done physio privately, but people do mention that the physio wait lists on the NHS can be quite long, and because it can be pressing for somebody's like quality of life, not necessarily dangerous, but they just want to get it figured out and have the physiotherapy, a lot of people will go private for something like that. And again, this could also go for something like an operation. So you could go private, pay privately for a surgery, of course, recommended by your GP. You can't just like sign yourself up for a surgery, but there are certain operations on the NHS that might take longer than others. So if you have something that is not life-threatening, it might be that the wait list for that operation is longer than you want to have to wait. Again, if you have something that is seriously wrong with you, that you need tests as soon as possible, you need surgery as soon as possible. As far as I have heard and experienced, the NHS does fast track you for those appointments and operations. Obviously, there is a little bit of a problem here when certain things like worldwide pandemics come into play and things have to play catch up. But in general, so I know some of you will comment and have different experiences, but in general, the NHS really does try and fast track very serious problems. So the next reason someone might go private in the UK would be that the NHS doesn't cover your problem. And so this could be something like you have a situation that isn't necessarily bad enough or doesn't affect your life enough for the NHS to deem it medically necessary. And so, for instance, when I went to the GP a while ago, years ago now, looking for acne medication. At the time, I really had to beg and plead for what I wanted to happen because the NHS wasn't immediately willing to cover it for me because based on what my face was like at the time, they didn't consider it to be medically necessary. I had to really explain how it had been affecting my life for a long time, and kind of talk about the emotional elements to it as well. So there could be things that are just easier to go private if you're having trouble with the NHS covering that operation or treatment. But again, this will usually be for something that isn't affecting your life to the extent that they deem it medically appropriate. And this isn't necessarily something that I hear all the time of people having real medical issues that can't be covered on the NHS. It's more for the like kind of cosmetic things that the NHS often doesn't cover. Another reason people might try and go private in the UK is that they want to guarantee more amenities in their hospital experience. And I literally do mean amenities. I mean, if you want to guarantee like a private room, if you just want like better food, or to not be on a ward. So a lot of people don't realize about the NHS hospitals are a lot of them still have wards. This completely threw me when I moved to the UK and went to visit one of my husband's relatives in the hospital. There were like 8 to 10 beds in what they call a ward. Kind of looked to me like what I had seen in pictures from like the war. And again, there was nothing wrong with their medical care. It was just that they were kind of all in this large room together, maybe some curtains around it. But in the US, I was very used to private rooms, or at least you'd only share with like one other person. So somebody might be looking for that kind of more like upscale hospital experience. I can say that the hospital near me, the NHS hospital near me, compared to the private hospital near me, definitely do differ in terms of what they look like and in terms of what amenities they have. And I know amenities are not necessarily important in terms of overall healthcare. However, I can see from an individual perspective why somebody, if they have the money, might want to go private and just pay for like a cushier experience. So the private hospital around us has like a golf course out back that people can play on, individual rooms. When you walk in, the reception area is just looks a lot more inviting and has like comfortable chairs and, you know, like these really like nice frosted glass panes at reception, as opposed to the NHS hospital near us, which kind of just looks a little bit bare bones. And, you know, like the seats that you wait in are like plasticky. Again, I'm not saying right now that I would prefer to go private than to go to the NHS. I will get to that later in the video. But what I am saying is they have the money in a private healthcare setting, usually to make it look and feel nicer. Now, there are some really nice NHS hospitals and GPs and things. I'm not saying that there aren't, but my experience with the NHS versus the private place I went are definitely that they do look different. And the next reason that you might want to go private in the UK is to do with actually seeing a private GP. So they often say that the NHS is a little bit of a postcode lottery. And what that means is that in some areas of the country, because the NHS depends on where you live, your GP literally depends on what your postcode is. Some areas of the country just have better amenities than others. Luckily, where we're registered is pretty good, but you could be in a situation where your GP that you were assigned, you just didn't like that surgery. They weren't very helpful. There didn't seem to be that much like funding in it. And in that case, you might choose to go to a private GP and to pay if you had the money. Again, I'm not entirely well versed on where in the country is better for NHS services. It is national healthcare, but I do know that the experience differs across postcodes. So if you have any more information about that, as any of my Brits watching, maybe experiences you've had moving to different places with different levels of services, comment down below and let us all know what your experiences were with care in different parts of the country. Okay, so let's actually compare private healthcare in the UK versus the NHS on a couple different topics. So the first place I want to start is waiting times. In that area, private healthcare usually wins. And again, I'm not saying that the NHS doesn't fast track people who have serious issues. However, a private healthcare provider, because you are paying them, can often get you in even sooner than that. So I could have gotten my scan the next day after I called in the evening to schedule one. I ended up doing it 2 days later, but they had options, they had appointments. On the NHS, I would have been waiting for someone to contact me when they sent me a letter in the mail or maybe called me, and then they would offer me one again within that 2-week window if the GP thought it was something serious, or within quite a longer window if not. And for many things, this is completely fine, but I have to say, for the waiting times comparison, private healthcare does win. Now, let's talk about cost, because this is where private healthcare does not win at all whatsoever. So the NHS is funded through taxes that we already pay as part of just the taxes that you consider in your head. You don't go to the GP and pay extra money. You don't go to an NHS hospital and pay anything. You don't have a baby and have a bill afterwards. Yes, Americans have a bill after they have a child, for usually a lot of money. So there's nothing at the point of service for the NHS to be paid. Private healthcare, definitely not. They're in for the money. They want your money. That's how it happens. So there are a couple different ways of paying for private healthcare. You can self-pay. You can literally just pay out of pocket. So the out-of-pocket cost for an ultrasound scan was starting at £323. So it is not cheap. Well, it's actually really cheap in comparison to the US, but in the UK, not cheap. You can also get private health insurance, and so that can typically range from like £600 to like £1,000+ per year, but you also have that excess, or kind of like the copay, as Americans would think of it, and this is the amount of money that you would need to spend self-paying until the private insurance kicks in. But private insurance is, if somebody's going to have like long-lasting private healthcare in the UK, typically they will get private health insurance. It might be provided from their employer. So any Americans watching, if you remember, the NHS is for all, which is amazing. Healthcare doesn't come as a perk, as part of your like job description or job perks or whatever we call it in America. What do we call it? Your, not perks, job package. It doesn't come as like your part of your employment package. So we all have access to the NHS, but some employers might choose to also offer private insurance cover as part of a reason to tempt people to work for them if they're interested in that. So in that way, the NHS obviously wins on cost. Every single time, always wins. The fact that you can have like a life-saving surgery for hours, you can have a child, you can have any sort of doctor's appointments, and you do not need to pay at the point of care, is what enables anybody from any background with any amount of money in their bank account to go and be seen and to get medical care. And that is something that is really an important part of why the NHS came to be and why it's so beloved in the UK, because you don't fear getting a serious illness and worrying about starting a GoFundMe or needing tons of money in your bank account. Everybody is in many ways on the same playing field when it comes to medical care here. Okay, so the third topic is the surroundings/amenities to a private healthcare versus an NHS hospital. And in that case, based on my experience, I think it's inevitable to give the win to private healthcare here, only because, again, the money in a private hospital setting is able to go to things like that. In the NHS, we don't want, as a country, as taxpayers in the UK, for our money to go towards repainting the waiting room when it could go towards life-saving treatment. So again, this is simply based on, if you physically look at a private hospital versus a lot of NHS hospitals, they might be more spruced up. They might have tons of individual rooms. They might have better food. And so in that way, in like the comfort aspect, I would say that they win, but hold on for my fourth point. Okay, so my fourth point is expertise of specialists. And this is where I want to really drive the point home for those of you who are just like dying on the inside because I'm talking about private healthcare. There is no difference between the expertise of specialists privately versus the NHS in the UK. You will not see a better doctor or a better surgeon than on the NHS. The NHS is not third world healthcare cover. There are amazing, well-trained specialists on the NHS. And here's a secret. A lot of those doctors who work privately also work for the NHS. They just pick up some private work on the side. You are seeing a lot of times the same people. It's just the difference between you paying for it at the point of service or you going through the NHS. So I really want to drive that point home. The private healthcare and the NHS, there is not a difference in the expertise or in the quality of the actual surgery, the quality of the scan, the quality of anything that you're going to experience. The only thing I could possibly point out is that maybe in a private setting, because you're paying for their time up front, maybe the appointments are a little bit longer, or you just like have a little bit more time than the standard NHS like 10-minute appointments that they try to stick to get everyone through. But that's a very, very small thing to consider. So the NHS should not be seen as like a lower option in terms of specialty or in terms of getting the care that you need. Now, to finish out this video, I want to give my opinion on, is private healthcare in the UK from an immigrant's perspective better than the US? Do I want more private healthcare options in the UK? The answer is absolutely not to more private options in the UK. There is a real drama right now politically about whether the NHS is moving towards something that is more private. And I have to say, as someone who has experienced definitely the NHS and now a little taste of private, I can say I 100,000 million billion trillion % think the NHS is better than private healthcare in the UK in the vast majority of instances. I do not want healthcare here to go private. I do not think that I think the NHS should be funded. It has absolutely changed the way I think about my health, and not having to worry about the the cost of certain things when I need medical treatment here is just really, really amazing. So for those of you who have watched from the beginning and were scared that an American would come in here saying that she thinks the UK should go more private because the NHS isn't as good as private healthcare, this video is 100% not that. Now, I do like that you have the option in the UK to go private. I don't think I'd like to be in a situation where I was just like, had no options. I'm going to do a video comparing American healthcare to private healthcare in the UK to see if we can compare and contrast those. I do like, in the rare instances that I might need it, having the option to go private, but that's just what I want it to be, an option. So the NHS really does win for me now that I've experienced both. Okay, so that brings me to the end of the video. I know it was a little bit more of a serious video, and I'm sure I'm gonna get all the comments below because private healthcare is definitely not seen usually as something that positive in the UK because the NHS is so loved, and I think that's completely fair. And like I said, I don't want the UK to go more private, but I did think it was interesting to compare and contrast what you get and what the reasons are and what the differences are between the NHS and private healthcare here. If you want to leave your comments below on your experiences, have you gone private? Have you not? I know a lot of people commented on my NHS versus American healthcare video with how much they love the NHS. Leave your love for the NHS below. Comment below with whatever your thoughts, feelings, concerns, comments, did I already say comments, whatever, are after this video, and I'll see you guys next time.